Johansson v. Disney. This, a court case, is probably one of, if not the most fascinating things we're ever going to discuss, but perhaps even the most important, because the way this is going to change Hollywood in either direction is fascinating. All right, and it's also incredibly complex. I'm going to try and put up some visuals here to help explain it, but you're going to have to listen. It's very, very tough. So you're going to have to really listen to the words that I am saying. All right, so to make sure I really got an understanding of this, and boy did I reached out to a number of my high-level contacts within the industry. I'm talking agents, producers, writers, and I was like, what do you think of this? What's going on? Tell me what it means to you. So I could get a picture of what's really going on here. And I did. And now I'm going to break it down for you. So on the face of it, Scarlett Johansson is suing Disney for releasing Black Widow not only day and date on Disney Plus and in theaters, but for releasing it at all. She is arguing that Disney knew that the box office market had still not recovered from the ongoing pandemic, but released the movie anyway. Why did they still release it? Because they wanted to drive Disney Plus subscriptions. Because the executives, the top level executives, including Bob Chapek, who I believe she actually names in the lawsuit, see financial gains from the success of that service. Financial gains that she is not participating in. And this is just so important. So I think a number of people, when they saw the headline, they were like, yeah, Scarlett Johansson feels that Disney's in breach of her contract with them, and she wants her Black Widow money. Oh, but she wants Disney Plus money. That's why this is so important. So she also argued, says in her lawsuit, that the reason it's a breach of contract is that they did not get her approval to release Black Widow simultaneously on Disney Plus, which is weird because Warner Brothers, and this is mentioned also in her lawsuit, Warner Brothers had to pay off all its 2021 talent. When I say talent, I'm talking, anyone who had a participation deal, which can be not just actors, but producers, directors, writers, all that good stuff. And of course, as we all know, Warner Brothers paid everybody, and it's been rumored, lost $1 billion in combined revenue and payouts because of this decision, especially because they haven't seen, it hasn't had quite of the rate of return in HBO Max subscriptions. But anyway, Scarlett Johansson's lawsuit says, hey, Warner Brothers paid people off, and she's like, nobody paid me. I'm surprised that Disney did not do that. In light of this lawsuit and the I thought streaming was a Pandora's box. This is like the Russian dolls of Pandora's boxes, just one within the other. I think maybe they should have just paid her rather than have this happen. One of my contacts said that Scarlett Johansson probably warned Disney that they were going to go public and they should pay her out, and they didn't. And I think you're going to kind of understand why Disney decided that. Because Disney, by the way, has the most successful streaming service outside of Netflix. So there's a lot more money in play. Keep that in mind as our discussion continues. Now, on a side note, now I'm really going to scare you. One of the trades put out an article saying like, oh yeah, and here, Scarlett Johansson, use this in your lawsuit. Black Widow is the #1 pirated movie. You should get upset with Disney for that. Because as we've been saying, there's a pristine copy released digitally by doing these day and date digital releases that can easily go out on piracy websites. So if now Disney's going to get sued for that and say that they lost profit participation, well then how can Disney stop that? I'll tell you how they can stop it. Right now, if you're a critic like myself, our copies that we get in advance for, our digital copies have, when we don't have to go to a screening, they have watermarks over the whole front of them. You got to watch it through the watermark. You get used to it, but it's jarring. So they might have to do that for consumers, which would be fascinating. So they can trace back leaked copies. But what if someone hacks someone's account? So you didn't release it. Someone hacked your streaming at Disney Plus account, copied the movie, and now suddenly you're on the hook to the U.S. government and Disney. That would mean that Disney and Hollywood in general would have to lobby governments across the globe to be more aggressive against online piracy sites. So that's really interesting. So you could have reduced piracy, and you might have to watch your streaming content through a watermark. That's crazy. We'll see what happens. But I mean, if they're going to get sued over that, what can they do? Now, Scarlett Johansson is also saying that Disney is making money off of her via Disney Plus, and that she should participate in that revenue. And she ain't talking about Premier Access. She's talking about the subscriptions that they get or retain because her movie is available on the service. And that is the heart of this lawsuit, which is why neither side will blink and why everyone in Hollywood is watching this case with bated breath already and couldn't believe that it happened. But they're watching silently because they're not quite sure which way it's going to go. And of course, nobody wants to be on the losing side. Scarlett Johansson could either end up a hero or a cautionary tale if the studios manage to destroy her. That's crazy. Now, that's not even the deep dive. That's just the basic setup of what's going on here. So, flashback to the dawn of streaming. Now, Netflix was just like, hey, I don't want to send you a DVD or a Blu-ray. I want to have a streaming service. But they were making a lot of money. So all the studios started pulling their content, and Netflix could see the writing on the wall. And they said, we better make our own content. And boy, did they. And so they exploded with the streaming business model where customers don't pay for content a la carte, but they pay an overall subscription price, which means that Netflix doesn't have to pay any outside parties a percentage of that revenue for a specific film or TV show because technically they don't have any revenue that can be allotted to anything individually. Because Netflix, of course, keeps their numbers secret. I don't think you can claim revenue for watching the first 2 minutes of a show. You know, you'd have to, well, I mean, it's funny because Netflix, you know, I think Netflix would change their criteria for what counts as a view if suddenly you could get participation for it. This is why this is so crazy. So Netflix, nobody's suing Netflix, although the UK government actually is suing Netflix, which we'll talk about in a moment. But anyway, talent in front of and behind the camera has been getting along with Netflix for 2 reasons. One, Netflix has been paying them out huge sums of money up front. So they're like, here, don't ask me ever again how this did, because I gave you a ton of money up front. So there's that. And then also, this was a new source of revenue. Netflix was new to the party. So the old traditional studio model still existed. So this was just an additional way to make money, because the studio model still pays better. So Netflix was like a new place to go. And you still had the opportunity to make old school Hollywood money off of the traditional studios. But then the studios look over and they say, hey, look, Netflix is making so much money, like even more than we are, through subscriptions, but they don't have to share any of it. They don't have to share it with talent. They don't have to share it with exhibitors. I mean, as the trades have started to point out, there's a small fee that has to go to like some of the, you know, the people where you can download the streaming services, but it's a fraction of what has to be given away to talent and exhibitors with the old model. So that's why you have an explosion of streaming services from the studios. And talent is starting to see the age-old Hollywood system of profit participation and residuals go up in smoke. It's a huge problem. It used to be that you could make a ton of money working in television or if you got a big hit blockbuster. But suddenly, as I just said, that is going away. Now, the unions, who also make their money off of dues and sometimes participation as well, they get a cut. They have been planning to go on strike over streaming participation when their contracts with the studios come up for renewal. And in the UK, as I just noted, the government who funds entertainment there is actually suing Netflix for viewership stats so they can claim participation for their shows which are airing on the service. But now Scarlett Johansson's lawsuit is going to be really driving this and perhaps inspire more lawsuits. This is so crazy. Now, Scarlett Johansson is going to argue that she is responsible for helping to drive subscribership or retain subscribership for Disney Plus, and therefore she should get a cut of the money since there are no tickets to point to. That would be the overall argument. Now with Black Widow, Disney's going to say there is a ticket because we did your movie on Premier Access, and we're giving you a cut of that $30. And also, Disney can point to F9, which was released at the same time as Black Widow, theaters only, performing on par with Black Widow, with the exception of China. But how is it Disney's fault that China hasn't given the movie a release date? That's unforeseeable circumstances. However, again, Scarlett Johansson is saying, I don't care what Universal did with F9. You shouldn't have released my movie in such a bad market. And you did so without my permission, which is breach of contract. Now, Disney, it's very, this is crazy. Now, Disney, in terms of the subscription situation, can argue that Black Widow did not drive subscriptions in a meaningful way. Because there's Loki, also from Marvel, which aired simultaneously. And all the other Disney content. Customers are subscribing for a package that Disney is the one supplying. However, outside of the Premier Access system, this opens the door, Scarlett Johansson's lawsuit, for top 10 shows or even top 25 shows on a streaming service to claim that they do drive subscriptions or retain subscriptions. That's where this gets crazy. So the cast and creatives of, say, Loki or Jessie, which is consistently in the top 10 on Disney Plus, could say, hey, people wouldn't necessarily subscribe if not for us. Carve us off a little piece of that subscription money. There's also juggernauts like Frozen and Moana, but animation unions are different. Just ask the people who worked on animated films adapted for live action, who are mighty upset that they have not been getting any credit or participation in those movies. And the bulk of Disney's vault is actually animated, so I guess maybe that's they got that going for them at least. But the live action stuff is going to be a real problem. Now here's where it gets even crazier. I know. Could it get crazier? It does. So if Disney has to start carving up their subscription revenue with all their hit shows, new and old, then suddenly Disney Plus isn't the cash cow that Disney signed up for, the whole reason they created it. One of the things that makes streaming services successful is a seemingly never-ending stream of content. But if all that content now gets a cut of the subscription numbers, they're going to have to make less content because they don't want to divide it up as much. And then suddenly you just basically have a TV channel. Because that's how TV channels are okay, because they're only airing one thing at a time. So there's less. So even though they do have to give a cut from ad revenue, it's limited. This is just insane. That's why Disney and all the studios who are launching streaming services, and also even Netflix, who could be potentially sued in the same manner, aren't going to budge on this. It's going to be a disaster if they do. Although one industry person I spoke to did say that they thought that Disney would settle rather than have to share their actual streaming numbers. But again, because it opens the door to other talent to threaten to sue, hey, you going to settle with me? I don't see how Disney could settle in this situation. And talent is being driven by the agents, managers, and lawyers, everyone who gets a cut of that paycheck. Scarlett Johansson didn't decide to sue Disney on her own. Her whole team decided to sue Disney because they all want that money, because they all see a cut of it. So again, you have two sides who just simply aren't going to blink, because as revenue has skyrocketed for studios thanks to streaming services, it's been taking a nosedive for talent and their teams. But what if these lawsuits ruin streaming services? How will fans react? Disney, in their response to Scarlett Johansson's lawsuit, shared her salary to date. And I think in an effort to be like, whoa, she already got a lot of money. Doesn't that make her unsympathetic? But let me explain this. I mean, it's hard to know who the hero or the villain is here. I think it's just a crazy situation. So, and I also whether or not streaming services are a viable idea, considering that everybody should fairly get a cut, or streaming services at least as they exist now. So crazy. So Disney said, we gave Scarlett Johansson $20 million already, and she's going to get some of this Premier Access money, so she has no right to complain. And $20 million is a lot of money, but just to put it in Hollywood perspective, because, again, we need to be fair here. Denzel Washington got $20 million from Warner Brothers so they could put The Little Things on HBO Max as well as in theaters. And while Denzel Washington, I would argue, is a bigger star than Scarlett Johansson, The Little Things is a much smaller movie than Black Widow. So I don't think they should be getting paid the same for those two films. And Scarlett Johansson is like, hey, I want to know how much money you made off of me overall on Disney Plus, not just from Premier Access, because there's a lot more revenue there. And Scarlett Johansson's like, I want my percentage of all of it, because that was the deal that we made. So yeah, and as I said, there's no way to tell who's going to be the hero and who's going to be the villain within the industry and with fans. I mean, you feel one way now, but how might you feel if you get a watermark slapped across the front of your thing and you can't do? I know a lot of you love to sail the seven seas when it comes to watching content. This could end that or severely hamper it. So that's why everyone is watching this case silently. Well, probably not the fans, but anyone who, nobody knows what side to pick because they don't know where the chips are going to fall. So it's fascinating. So Scarlett Johansson's all the way out there by herself. That's pretty brave, I think, on the one hand. Now, should she have sued? I think it's a tough call because Hollywood is a town of relationships, and you don't want to be known as litigious. It's really bad to be known as litigious in Hollywood. People usually only sue when their careers are basically ruined and they have no other options. That's why Frank Darabont sued AMC, because he was like, that was my ship that had come in, and so that's why he did that. And I think that's why David Ayer is potentially threatening, it seems. I don't know what David Ayer is doing, but it seems like he might be trying to sue Warner Brothers for ruining his career, but I don't know. I don't know. That's a whole different conversation. Let's see if he actually does it. But Scarlett Johansson is arguably at the top of her career, and Disney can point also, although if Disney really wants to get ugly, and I think they will. If I were Disney's lawyer, I would say this. I would say, you've never had a big hit box office wise outside of Marvel, Scarlett Johansson. There's maybe one non-Marvel hit, and that's Lucy. And guess what? Its box office is on par with Black Widow. So what are you telling me you would have made more money somewhere else? So that's really fascinating. Also, she was supposed to do Tower of Terror with Disney, and that seems pretty sweet. It's like, chalk it up to the it's really hard to decide what to do here. I'd be curious what you would think. Like, hey, chalk it up to the pandemic. You did make $20 million, probably a little bit extra off of that. Go make Tower of Terror a big hit. Disney, of course, it would be her Jungle Cruise. She would have a huge hit. She would be the face of that. So why ruin her relationship with the biggest studio in town? Because Black Widow maybe wouldn't have done any better or much better. I don't think, honestly, that Black Widow would have been $1 billion picture under the best of circumstances. I still think it would have tapped out at around in the 600 million range, like Doctor Strange or Ant-Man and the Wasp. And so how far off is it really going to be there once you do put in the Premier Access numbers, to be honest? Everyone I spoke to, all of my industry contacts, do feel that Disney will never work with Scarlett Johansson again. At least that's how they feel today. Other studios, they're not quite sure. Again, being litigious is bad. Ain't nobody want to get sued. So they're like, man, if we hire Scarlett Johansson, will she maybe sue us if she's unhappy? So I think, but Disney in particular is like really ticked off because she's threatening their whole Disney Plus cash cow. But I have to say, if the public rallies behind Scarlett Johansson and enough people in the industry do, well, then maybe Disney will cave. Like they caved on James Gunn. They hired him back. So you don't know. I think that Scarlett Johansson, again, I don't know what would be more valuable to you, this supposed Black Widow money that she's not getting or the money she could make with Disney down the line. It's really interesting. So again, this is all over the money that streaming is bringing in. And it's just so much money that I don't think you'll see either side blink. It's studios versus producers, actors, directors, and writers. Anyone who would get a cut of profit participation. And it's going to get ugly. And streaming services could look quite different after the dust settles. Disney, again, is a notoriously cheap studio. And with all that's at stake here, again, maybe like Warner Brothers, they should have just paid her off. Maybe Warner Brothers made the right call in just paying people off to take just a hit in 2021 rather than risk the entire streaming service. And again, Disney Plus has been the most successful to date, so it is the one I'm sure a studio would want to most protect. Very, very complex. I'm curious, what do you think? And you're the customer. What do you think is of the customer of all this? What do you care how the studios or the producers or the actors or the directors or the writers feel? Because you're involved in this. What do you think? You're the one who pays all the money that they're fighting over. That's coming from you. And you're being asked to pay for an awful lot of streaming services these days. And also, you like watching Black Widow at home, a lot of you. A lot of you like to be able to do that. You like having a never-ending stream of content. What if that were to go away? But at the same time, I do think people should be paid what they're worth. As I said, I think the bottom line might be that streaming services to this degree might not be viable. I don't know, maybe they could just all divide all this amazing money. But we still don't know what streaming services are doing to movies. That's another question. Oh, it's crazy. As I said, it really is Pandora's, like a Russian nesting dolls of Pandora's boxes. Oh, wow. At least we have a front row seat. Okay, share those thoughts down below, subscribe today, and of course, as always, you can check out some more videos right now.